Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining in for episode 6 of the New Mind Cafe podcast. My name is Zach Madsen, and I got to relax with this episode and be a listener along with you all. Myles Haruki interviewed one of his friends named Michael Garcia. Michael is a theater actor in the Southern California area, and in this interview he showed how his own life experience was joined with a role that he recently played, where the line between acting and experiencing true emotions became hard to recognize. It was super interesting to hear how his art and personal life intertwined to highlight the story that he played a role. You can hear that for Michael, being an actor is a way of expressing and embodying his story in a way that is brought out to an audience so that they can encounter with the story as well. And I do just want to give a little disclaimer that this interview does get into some pretty intense moments where Michael explains aspects of this play that he was in. The play takes place in the 60s and 70s, and it's about some of the hardships that the LGBTQ community went through during this time period. It was great to hear Michael's perspective as he stepped into a role that involves such dense and heavy content. But yeah, just a little trigger warning for you all up front, especially for those in the LGBTQ plus community. There could be some stuff that's hard to hear, but I do think it was such a great conversation and really awesome stuff to hear and to get his perspective. So, I hope you enjoy, and we love you all. Thank you all so much.
Hello friends, welcome to this week's episode of New Mind Cafe. Today it is just I, not with Zach, Myles Haruki, and today I am joined by a good friend of mine, Michael Garcia, otherwise to me known as Michael Mike.
That's me.
Who I met working at Starbucks.
Hi everyone. This is my first time doing a podcast, by the way.
This is my first time. No, I'm kidding. I've done some.
Okay, good. Okay, so yeah. I have you to rely on. But yes, for those who don't know, Myles and I have known each other. We're almost 2 years now.
Almost 2 years. Do you want to share the story? I like the way you share the story.
Oh, no. Well, so I was looking to work at Starbucks, and I was like, okay, what's the closest one by where I live? So, if I was going to go, I was just going to go in, get a drink, and be like, just take the vibe of everything. I'm like, oh, I like how it was it was close by, walking distance, like 10 minutes away. And I walked in, and I went with Tanner, my boyfriend, and we walked in, and I remember being like, wow, this place is kind of small, which was kind of fine, honestly. It wasn't a drive-through, which I imagine is way more hectic. But Myles was the one who rang me up on my drink. And, when you ring somebody up, the last thing you ask is, like, may I just have a name for your order? And I said Michael. And, everyone has, their subtle, ways to remember people, remember names. And Myles was like Michael Myers. I'm like, yeah. And I did a little, knife kind of, mime.
Yeah. Wow.
So, I was just kind of giggling about that. And then, I get hired, and this is maybe 3 weeks later, where we actually worked the shift together.
Yeah.
And I think I even asked you, are you guys hiring? And I think I can't remember. I think you might have given me Jesse's card.
Oh.
And I think I emailed. No, I think I emailed Jesse, or I got a call from somebody who wasn't Jesse, and it was basically come to the hiring event, which was at another Starbucks down the road. But then 3 weeks later passed by, and I get hired, and then I work with Myles. I'm like, hey Myles, remember me? And I do that, kind of mime the knife thing. It's like, oh yeah, remember me. And then the rest is history from there.
It's funny because we both have a lot of experience work. I mean, we could record a whole podcast about the honest truth of working at Starbucks.
Spilling the tea.
It is a complicated ship over there, but I do remember I had just started working there, and I went through this cycle on register where right at the beginning I just wanted to prove myself. So I made a huge effort to connecting with people.
Yeah, and you did. You did.
And then I went through a cycle where I was like, I'm over this, I hate this.
Oh yeah.
And then I just didn't make an effort. But then as I ended, I was like, no, this is important. I saw this article from the Los Angeles Times that a lot of older folk are literally skipping self-checkout lines in grocery stores because they're craving human connection.
Yeah.
So it kind of helped contextualize. I realized this isn't we do make a difference in people's days.
Oh, yeah, and this was like also post-pandemic. This is, mind you, 2021. Like, coming off, right? I mean, it was technically like still around, not as much as it is now.
Yeah,
but
we're
still.
all masked up. I was wearing a mask, and so
I don't even think I knew what you look like for the first month. And same with Jesse, our boss. I had no idea what our boss looked like. It was all masked up.
Yeah, I always assume people are not always, but I'm not going to say who, but I generally assume people are better looking. I just like Brad Pitt features.
But also, I remember the first time I saw you without the ponytail, like in the hat, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this luscious mane! Who is this? Who is this pretty Jesus over here?"
Oh, pretty Jesus!
Yeah.
Keep it secret, keep it safe. But so let's get into so tell me. You are an actor.
Yes.
And recently, so the main reason that I'm having you on our podcast is recently you were in a show.
Yes.
So why don't you do a quick introduction to yourself as an actor in your craft, and tell us kind of the a quick synopsis of the show that you were in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And the part that you played.
Yeah.
I'm going to set that up.
Yeah. I've been acting for quite a while, about half my life now. So, I mean, let me see, I'm 27. I started acting when I was 13, 14.
Wow, you started young.
Yeah. I was in high school. You know,
Were you
I was
a kid actor?
No, you know what's funny is I was really shy growing up. Actually, between me and Jonathan, my twin brother, he was the social one and I was the shy one. I was very very reserved, and it was freshman year, and I had become friends with certain people, and they were like, "Oh, we're going to audition for this play," and I'm like, "Okay, I'll see what happens." So, it's weird. You remember, there's a lot that I forget from high school, just from time passing by. But one thing I always remember is my audition, and I remember just being on stage, and I had the lines, and it was the scene we were doing It's a Wonderful Life, and it's the scene where I think he visits. He visits the graveyard. I haven't seen the movie in quite a while, but I can't remember if he visits his own grave or he visits somebody he knows, or his dad. I think it was his dad's grave. And it's supposed to be an emotional scene, and I just don't really remember what I said, but I just remember just kind of okay, this is what it's got to be. And then, it was good enough to this is also high school, by the way. They accept everyone. There was not some cutthroat process, but I ended up getting an ensemble part. And that was kind of my first real taste of acting on a stage. And, a couple years go by and I start doing a little bit of musical theater here and there throughout high school. And, just kind of rounding myself out as, being in my teenage years, being a little bit more social, getting out of my shell. And then eventually I'm I think I want to pursue this as a career. So I go to college. So I went to Adelphi University, and I graduated in 2018. Gosh, it's been already 5 years. And I majored in theater. So I did got my BFA and all that, and then came out to LA because I'm I want to try film and TV and commercial work, and that's a whole different breed. Because theater was really my foundation.
Wow.
And it's just ironic that I come out to LA and I book a play, so it's something that I can never really lose. But it was my first play in 5 years. So I did this recently back in June, this play called Sick. And it was part of the Hollywood Fringe Festival. And for those who don't know what the Hollywood Fringe Festival is that every June in LA they put on thousands of productions around the city. Some original pieces. Actually, I don't know if they all have to be original pieces, but they all range from 15 to 20 minute one person shows or short plays to full on productions. And ours was a little bit more on the longer side because this play was an hour 40. Actually, it was an hour 40, and we were trying to cut it down because it was closer to 2 hours at first. But it is a play about it's set in the 1970s, specifically 1972, 1973, and it's about. The reason why it's called Sick is that it's about the declassification of homosexuality on the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Which
Look
is
how smart you are.
Yeah, no, listen, I did this a couple months ago. I'm trying to remember all the acronyms and all the.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot to kind of going back on. But it's a historical, kind of more of a. Dramedy, because there is some comedic elements to it, but it's more of a historical drama. It tells a story about these activists and these physicians and these therapists who were basically trying to stand up to the APA, which is the American Psychiatric Association, to get homosexuality off the mental illness list, which is what the DSM was. And I think it was, DSM, I think it was like chapter 3.2.0, which is where homosexuality was considered a mental illness. So, and what made it so meaningful is that it was the 50th anniversary this year. So it was back in 1973.
Wow.
And it's an original piece. It was written by Don Huini, who is such a master at writing, and he's so generous, and he was an incredible director.
Yeah.
And I felt so honored to be part of this piece that he wrote. And it's being a period piece about the gay liberation era. Really, it hit close to home for me, being gay, obviously openly gay, and it was a really heavy show. Well, I think
you had a heavy part in it.
Yes. Yeah. So I played the young version of the main character, who was an activist by the name of Ron Gold, and I play a flashback scene where he is, and Ron Gold was a real person. He was a real activist, and he was a writer, and he was an aversion therapy survivor. And what aversion therapy was basically back when physicians and therapists, if somebody wanted to be, it was just basically things to cure your homosexuality. So it was basically, to put it bluntly, like the torture. To put it bluntly. But yeah, so aversion therapy specifically was shock therapy. They would do almost like chemical therapy or like chemical castration. It's all under that umbrella of aversion therapy. But specifically with the scene that I was in, I played two characters. So I play the young version of the main character, young Ron, and then I play a young kid named Dalton, who's like a young teenager who's who goes to see a therapist, and it's his first. He specifically goes to the Gay Activist Alliance, which was basically a treatment center for anybody who was gay, and it was basically anybody who could. He was in a therapy session, and it was his first time having a gay therapist. So it's a scene where he's talking about his trauma, and that's what the show really was all about. Is trauma, and it's really tough. It's a really tough show.
How many times did you perform this?
Oh yeah, so we had about 3 or 4 days of rehearsal a week for about a month. It was a pretty quick rehearsal process.
And that's quick.
Yeah, it was quick. and also, mind you, being my first play in 5 years, and then also having to do, I was juggling 3 jobs. Well, still doing it. I was juggling 3 jobs at the time and doing this on the side. So it was a lot. And every rehearsal was basically just waterworks, because it was 2 very emotional scenes.
Yeah.
One scene, I'm going through shock therapy, which was tough, and then another scene I'm talking about my trauma and being not being out, but being closeted and having your parents find out that you're gay. So it's really really 2 emotional scenes,
really vulnerable. And I could say as an
vulnerable
audience member, it's
because Myles did see the show.
I did. I saw it with Gracie, and it was fantastic and so moving and so timely too.
Oh yeah,
because it very much felt like it was written for today. But your scene is so important because that moment of you going into the therapy session, that kind of becomes the catalyst for the change, the activism in the show. So if your scene doesn't work, you don't buy the main character's character transformation. Yeah. And so it really did affect me in a I don't necessarily have words for it, but it was really very effective, but also not compelling, but not something I'd want to go to all the time. Yeah. So I'm curious for you, 2 questions. One is, I'm curious what auditioning for a part like that looked like. And 2, I want to kind of curious what is it like? How do you even get yourself to go there consistently? Yeah. Do you need to rally with the actors after and go we're all okay?
Yeah. Sometimes it is like that. But when it came to the audition process because it's actually, if it wasn't for Tanner, I wouldn't have known about it because it was through. So we're part of this. I'm part of this. Well, I used to. I'm not there anymore. But I was part of the AMAW, which is the Anthony Meindl Acting Workshop in Hollywood. And there's like a mass email that goes out every other week about, certain auditions happening here and there. And one of them was for this play. And Tanner's like, hey, there's this play that's casting. You should check it out. And we both auditioned. And it was really like, you just send a headshot and resume and to the casting director. And then that was it. And then I got a call being like, hey, can you audition this time and this time? And we both went to go audition. And then, I did the audition and it was the scene, I think it was 3 scenes, but one of them was for, so it was the 2 parts that I ended up playing. So it was the therapy scene, the shock therapy scene. And then there was another scene where, I was supposed to be, a character who, is like it's his first time going to a gay club, and it was. Oh,
I remember that.
So
scene. Yeah.
So it was like a Marine, like a recently openly gay Marine who meets Ron, and he's like, was very moved by your activism, and it's kind of like more of a scene of gratitude. It's not supposed to be super emotional, so that was a little bit of a dive back. But I ended up not playing that part. But anyway, did the audition, and I was kind of nervous.
So just to clarify, like you didn't have like this ahead of time. You went in and they gave it, or did you get the script ahead of time?
No, I think you get the script ahead of time. Okay. So I had like maybe a week with it. And it was, you can still have the script in your hand. But
this ain't like Star Wars. Where like we got to cloak you. It's not like there's drones trying to like leak out the script or something.
But you did have like people like there watching you because it was the one of the.
Who was there?
So it was Dawn, who was the director. There was Desiree Staples, who was she was the assistant director, dramaturg, and then. There was Peggy Burt, who was one of the producers, and I can't remember. I think there might have been a few others there as well. But the scene, it was just kind of like, so it was in this. Ended up being in our rehearsal space, but it's in this dinky little theater in Hollywood, and it was just like a tiny, like almost looked like a conference room. And with a chair and then like the table and them sitting across, and they were very welcoming and they were super, super kind, and I kind of felt like, okay, these are actually like nice people, it wasn't very intimidating. They weren't sitting there like with pens, and it wasn't like, them in suits. And it wasn't a boardroom meeting,
not like a Saturday Night Live audition.
No. Yeah. It was really chill. And, I like with every audition, you have to add a little bit of oomph into there. So I did my best to do it as if I was performing, in the actual performance of the show.
Yeah.
And it's 2 very emotional scenes. So I was basically like waterworks all the way through. And it's funny because I think so I first did the therapy scene.
Oh, God.
So I did, like, I was really emotional at the end of it because he's supposed to cry. In the script, it calls for him to cry. But, it's something that was close to home for me, so it was pretty easy to fall into. I remember just kind of like, I was ending the scene and there's no, like, okay, end of scene. Like, you're crying and you kind of give yourself a little bit of time to, get out of character. But, like, waterworks and the scene ends and I'm just like, shall we do the next scene? Because I'm like, nobody was talking and I was like, shall we do the next scene? And then they started laughing, it's just kind of like to break and I didn't mean to do that, but I'm like, no one's talking, I'm just gonna like,
because laughter is so important when like that levity is important when you're going to that heavy place, because you can't stay there all the time.
Oh yeah,
but that was probably a good way of like connecting with them and going, that would probably, good on you little manipulator.
No, basically, it's all acting, darling.
No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, no. So I and then I heard back. Yeah, and then I heard back about. I think it was later that night. It was really quick, actually. Later that night or the next night, that I got the part, and it was from Don, the director, and he knew that I think I had mentioned the audition, like, oh, my boyfriend just auditioned before me, and he was really nervous because, like, I hope I didn't bring any tension to you guys about him not getting the part? I was like, oh no, it's fine. And Tanner was very nonchalant about it. And
because Tanner is also
he's an actor too. Yeah. So like
and a writer
yes, writer, actor. Me not a writer. I don't know how to write. But so it was not like anything awkward. Like there was thank God there was no tension, obviously. But so that happened, and then it was a 6-week rehearsal process followed by another. It was basically a full. I think it was 9 performances together, which is a lot for the Fringe, because the Fringe, like most shows, get like.
Really?
Maybe, most shows, like, I know that
usually get 6 performances?
Maybe, no. Well, some.
Keep it light.
Most of them actually get really, like, only like 2 or 3 performances. I knew a couple shows that had like one night only. I had a friend of mine that was in a show that only had 3 performances.
Oh, so
but we had 9, and 2 of those were previews.
Oh.
So it was 2 previews and 7 performances, and this was spread out all through June. So it ranged from like the beginning of June, like June 2nd, to like, I think, the end of June, about like the 27th or so.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of cool to be part of, like, because when you're in high school or college, it's it's through a weekend really, or 2 separate weekends. But it was kind of cool it was my first time experiencing theater where you're going to work and sometimes both jobs in one day, and then have to go to rehearsal, and then other times where you work a full day and then you're like, okay, I got to go perform, on stage. So it was really my first time to kind of seeing how that is, juggling with your work life and, doing a whole theatrical production. And this show
you're literally doing it.
Yeah, it really did feel like it. And it was great. It was very rewarding.
You're like Peter Parker.
Oh, yeah. Being Spider-Man and Peter Parker. 2
action right there.
So, actually more like Mary Jane, honestly. Working at the restaurant and then performing.
That's on it.
But the show is really, it was a lengthy show. And it's a very wordy show, too. Not that it was bad, but it's very historical. And it was about, I think it was about 17 or 18 different scenes. So it was 2 acts. And each act had about like 8 to 9 scenes, and there was a lot of transition. So it was a full production. It's like a full. This could have been a 2-hour play with like maybe a half-hour intermission. But this is the Fringe, so we only have a specific.
It had that feel. It felt like a full theater experience going. It didn't feel like, this is like a short thing. It felt like a
full thing. Yeah. Lighting. We had a lot of costumes because it's set in the 70s. So we try to be as accurate as possible. We had a lot of props. Like we had a couch. We had 2 different tables that would double as like a conference table or like a coffee table, and then we had some chairs, a bunch of chairs actually. We had some podiums, like 2 different type of podiums for different scenes. So in between these scenes, it was, I think, I found myself. It got to the point where I was memorizing the scene changes because we are not only actors in the show, but we have no stage hands. We have no we're doing the transitions.
I would see you
ourselves.
Like going up picking up stuff.
So that was a lot. No, and I think I was in every transition because there was only about like 9 of us in the show, and having to move all these props, and we couldn't tape anything on the ground because it's part of the Fringe, so it's in one theater space that we had another show coming in, and we had a show before then, so it's you can't put anything permanent on the ground, and we also couldn't use like props like liquids or anything, so it was a lot of miming, but it's theater, go figure, right? So that was it was a lot. It was a full production, really, which is really for the Fringe is really fun to do. I mean, it was my first play in 5 years, so it was pretty neat to be a part of that.
Yeah, to be a part of like a thing larger than you, collaborating with other artists. Writers, actors. And
it's something that is really hits close to home for me, as I mentioned, because being open and gay and wasn't always like that, and back in the 70s, it's like that was illegal, and that's like it was criminalized, and we've come so far, but also we haven't gone that far, so it's really really relevant today, even though it was 50 years ago. I know your second question was like the process and having to do that because it's a.
Actually, I want to make it because that was actually something I was thinking about. Actually, on the table, good audio, good radio right here because I'm pointing out a visual thing that only the two of us can see.
Wait, what do you put there?
I have pictures of my family members. I'll show them to
cute.
Michael, actually.
Wait, I want to see.
So, this right here is my grandfather.
Oh, wow.
And that's my maternal grandmother,
Oh,
Afton,
cute.
or Hatsuko, Ron. That's Russell and Steve. And it is a little, I mean, all the people in this picture have passed.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, or have died. I'm trying to work on using the die word. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think people soften the blow.
Oh, yeah.
But it's weird because I even think about, like, the conditions of a lot of people of color today have changed. It's not necessarily easy. Like, there's racism is still, like, the oxygen
Oh, yeah.
that we're swimming in, and so is, like, homophobia and transphobia.
Xenophobia.
And all of
all
that.
this stuff.
But the conditions have changed where it is easier. And I'm just using that to connect to your point. I could not imagine how hard it would be to come out in the 70s, for Christ's sake.
Oh, yeah.
Like, could you
Oh,
imagine?
yeah. No, it's... Yeah.
Just look
that's
at the
what it
numbers
is.
of Gen Zers coming out versus, like, boomers. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
1% to, like, 20%.
Oh, yeah. I know.
So whatever.
This generation's with it. Like, they know. It's, like, so much easier. Now it's, like... back then it was like, even for me when I came out, I came out pretty young. I was 13, and this was like circa 2010. And for me, this was a big deal. And I remember coming out, like I told my friends first, and it was I was lucky because it was very welcoming. And I told my twin brother, and it was just like, almost like nothing ever really changed. And then, my parents were a little shocked at first, but they came around. But it's very different now. But yeah, no, I mean, coming out now is so much different than it was, even like 13 years ago. And so much like even 50 years ago, people weren't out, people would be closeted, their entire lives. And, it's just all about the environment that people are in now. I mean, now it's a little bit more accepting, but also, it's way more accepting now, but also, there's a lot of hateful rhetoric that is out in the open that's almost like unfiltered, and there's a lot of people who feel the need that they can express that rhetoric, and it's like a double-edged sword. It's way more accepting. Like, with more acceptance, there's more hate, and that's really unfortunate. But I remember when I came out back in like 2010, I was freshman year of high school, and I slowly came out to like my friends, my family, like my twin brother. It was totally fine. My friends were totally cool with it. And it's really, I always kind of forget, but it's really kind of sad, but I kind of came out as bi at first, even though I knew I wasn't bi, but it was like, in a way, coming out as bi was seen as more accepting because, coming out to like, some people, they're like, oh, well, at least if you still like girls, that's totally fine with me,
No.
It's like bad, Yeah, and bi erasure is also like such a thing now where it's like people think it's all black and white, and it's like, oh, if you're bi, that means like, you have to like one or the other, but it's like, no, it's not that. And
why can't we just leave room for sexuality to be way more complex and fascinating and dynamic?
It is. Nothing's
than our
black
rigid
and white.
Categories could.
And I'm guilty of that. But I feel bad about that. Like when I think back to it now, but I was 13. I don't know what I was doing. And as you get older, you learn more things about yourself. And I remember it was like, let me see, I think it was April 2011. So this is like still my freshman year that my official way to come out, I think before I did a Facebook post or Instagram post or anything, I had a little pride ribbon that I put on the back of my backpack. And I remember like walking into school.
What were you feeling as you did that?
I was so nervous. I was like, this is my way to come out. Even though it was so tiny, you can barely notice it. But to me, I'm like, everyone's like looking at me right now. This is insane. And I felt like I had like this giant like spotlight on me. I was walking through the hallways, which it was like the tiniest freaking thing. And it's so funny how like, I think about it now. No, I don't think anyone did. And it was really just, I mean, for me at that time, it was such a big deal. And then I think it wasn't until my sophomore year where I basically, made a whole Facebook post and, it was, oh gosh, I don't even remember, but it was a whole paragraph. And, I kind of came across it, a couple weeks ago, and I'm just like, oh, this is so cringe. You know, it's just like so.
Fringe?
Yeah, Fringe. Oh, I get it.
This is Fringe. Okay,
yeah, Hollywood Fringe. But you know, it's like if somebody comes out nowadays, and it's like, okay, yeah, who cares? Great. You know, it's almost like it's like, not to downplay it, but like,
depending on where you live, because like in terms of like the past and where we come from, like I come from a pretty conservative. I mean, I was raised evangelical, and coming out, don't identify as LGBTQ, so I can't relate to it firsthand. And I have to say that because I have to hold that understanding that this is something that I will never know firsthand.
Yeah.
As a straight person, I just will never know that experience. But I do know, I don't know, I've never really talked about this at Starbucks because it's not really casual conversation things, but I worked as a youth pastor at a church.
Really?
And so I grew up evangelical.
I had no idea.
And I have to hold, like this is kind of a vulnerable story, but I remember being in the room in a meeting where we wanted to teach on gender and sexuality. Mm-hmm. And I was sort of in this, because evangelicals are not pro-queer. Mm-hmm. No. Not a surprise. Most evangelicals, there's probably like a sect within it, but generally speaking, in the sentiment in the air, as everyone knows, they're not affirming.
Yeah.
And the community, a lot of these communities, like the one I come from, if you become affirming, you're basically not a Christian. So for me, having my job on the line, I had to go through this existential wrestling where I was making more friends who identified as queer, but I also was in this weird middle space of if I came out and shared that with the world that I was affirming, that I would lose my job. So thankfully I eventually left and the conditions became safer for me, and I was only in that wrestling for a few years. But I do remember, like, I preached a sermon where I shared some of that rhetoric, and not in a hateful way. I tried to be as gentle as possible and say, we've done a terrible job loving this community, but I also have to hold that tension that there are probably, knowing the amount of Gen Zers that identify as LGBTQIA+, I have to hold that tension that I probably played a role in discouraging that for some of these students. And I think it's another way of affirming where we come from is complex. But it doesn't mean that change isn't possible.
Oh, yeah.
But there's also a way of holding that with taking ownership of the things we've done in the past to harm others, which is sort of the position everyone's in, whether they're aware of it or not.
As long as you grow from it.
As long as you grow. But it's so complicated because even though the conditions have generally changed, there's still pockets where I know it's still incredibly difficult. Mm-hmm. But thank God for social media, right? And podcasts and different avenues, because regardless of what your youth pastor is teaching, you'll find students at school. I mean, there are the exception of like homeschooled parents who just try to incubate their kids.
Yeah.
But I'm really thankful that a lot of youth have the internet.
Yeah, because there's so much. There's safe spaces. There's like, resources of information, and I remember before I come out, I was like researching like coming out stories and like hearing on YouTube, and people still do that to this day, and I even made one myself, which is somewhere buried in my YouTube channel. I probably will never see the light of day, but there was a lot of resources out there where people talked about their story. People were vulnerable enough to share their stories and their process, which was so helpful for me because I wasn't like, I think I was maybe like, me and another friend of mine were like, the only gay ones in our class, and I think as time went on, like people started coming out, and like people were like identifying as queer as we've gotten older. But like at first, it was like you feel like you're on this island, and I know a lot of people do, and especially like rural communities where it's like where one town is like 6,000 people and everyone knows each other, and like word spreads fast.
Right?
Yeah, that's how Tanner grew up in Jersey, in like the countryside of Jersey. I mean, I grew up in the suburbs like outside of Boston. So like it was a pretty decent sized town. But it's at the time I just feel like it was not as. I mean, despite it being in Massachusetts, being historically like the first state to legalize gay marriage, and there's a lot of pockets of liberal identifying communities. Yeah. But I think I feel like my town was like on the cusp of that, but also being very conservative and Republican. It's still there. Yeah. And I feel like even more so now, it's a little bit leaning more towards the or at least from where I'm from, I feel like it's a little bit more Republican conservative, which is, it's time changes and, but it's different in every community because there's some places that are unluckily, like, extremely conservative and there's people who can't express that part of themselves.
And that's hard. And even if we're not in a community like that, those narratives are a part of our country.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that they're in the air impacts us. And there's that phrase that a lot of people use that we're not free until all of us are free. So if there's something that's impacting part of us, it's actually impacting the whole of us. So it is something to hold, for the people out there that are in those spaces.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. And
you can't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah. What?
You can't be too hard on yourself. And that was a time. It was a time back in the day, and things are different. We all learn. Yeah, I
appreciate you saying that. It's a weird tension to hold, because I think there's also a balance of not being hard on yourself, because I know I've always been a quick changer and a quick adapter, which is something that I'm really grateful for. So when I'd learn new information, I would change. But at the same time, because there is a power dynamic, there's a way of holding yourself responsible with not canceling yourself, because you're also part of this space.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you saying that. And it's something that I am learning to get better. I'm learning. You guys are seeing some of the process here, because I'm learning to get better at holding, the phrase is transcend and include, where you transcend and have to grow past the old parts of yourself that aren't helpful, but also not negate the whole of who you were before.
Yeah, it's acknowledging the past, but also informing the future. And humans and people, we're changing every day. Not to get super heady, but on a molecular level, we're changing every day. Cells die
every moment.
Yeah, every moment. So it's all a learning process. And there's people who, we're in this generation, we're learning a lot of different things that a couple generations before us were not accustomed to, and that's new for them. So it's an adjustment for them as well. And I think the direction that we're going in is way more understanding and way more accepting, but still there's a lot of work to be done.
Absolutely. I like this. A little side tangent.
I know. Listen, I'm excited, Kathy. I will talk about anything.
No, this is good stuff. This is good stuff. But I do want to bring it back to the show.
Yes.
And so, obviously, I think maybe what we're getting at without verbally getting at it is how pressing the message of this show is.
Yeah.
Not only to remember our past, but to know how our past informs where we are now.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if there's any, for you as an artist, as an actor, as a human, what was what are your takeaways reflecting back on that creative process?
Yeah.
And what were you kind of hoping that audiences, sensitive question because you want people to get what they get out, but what are you kind of hoping is the message that you brought out into the world through the show?
Yeah. So, this show is very historical, and I feel like it's a part of history that not a lot of people do know about. People don't really know about, homosexuality considered being a diagnostical illness, and, it's the fact that it was declassified 50 years ago. But most people don't know that, and there was a time where, this was written in paper, and it's a mental illness, and it's part of history that I feel like is really swept under the rug with a lot of different things in history. There's things that we didn't learn in school. We didn't learn about Black Wall Street in Oklahoma. We didn't learn about Seneca Village in New York City. We didn't learn about the stuff that happened to the Osage Indians and Native Americans back in the 1920s. You know, it's all this historical moments in our history that it's just kind of like not enough people do know a lot about until you reach out and look for it. Yeah. So I think this piece is really just something that's like, hey, you know, we were like this about 50 years ago, and, you know, we've come a long way, but it's still stuff that is still relevant today, you know, especially now with like, you know, trans rights being questioned and Roe v. Wade and a lot of stuff that is being, a lot of steps that are taken, that we're going steps back, you know, but it's like we can't go back because, you know, we got to learn from our history, you know?
And there's another connection there to stuff that's still in the DSM that probably should get removed.
Oh, yeah. And I can't remember. There's a piece of the play where they talk about how other past DSMs used to be, like there were things like, I think being cranky was like, or there's like a piece of the play. I wish I had it, but there's a part where he talks about Ron Gold has this board of these officials in front of him, and he's basically kind of pleading his case on why homosexuality should not be part of the DSM. And he talks about how ironic it is for some things that are completely harmless to be part of a mental illness list when, you know, and it shares the same vein. It's on the same page, you know. It's like you can look it up, but it's really it's crazy how far we've come and also how far we haven't, you know. And I mean, for me as an actor, it was really exciting to be part of a play or part of a piece that, you know, is part of queer history, and it was and it's something that I related to on such a deep level, which is why those really heavy scenes, it was like really challenging because you are living, you know, you're reenacting or living this scene and these characters that literally went through this stuff in their daily lives and went through it, and, you know, this scene where you're being like the scene that I did with the aversion therapy, it's like it was shock therapy. So what they would do is that they would strap these electrodes to your wrist and to your genitals, and they would show you a slideshow, and they would take your heart rate too. So they would see that, like, they would show you basically, you know, pornography in a way, where it would show you women or straight women, or like, you know, does this affect you in any way? And then it would go to males and you know, homoerotic like material, and then the slightest change of heartbeat or anything, like your heart rate or blood pressure would, you know, you get a physical reaction of pain, and it's really was that is a shock therapy. And there's people who felt like they had no other way, and there's people who, you know, were sort of trapped in this situation that those are the cards that they were dealt with, and that they didn't want to be gay anymore, so they felt like they had to do this. And these medical professionals who believed that this was the right way to go about that, it's just extremely effed up. And they used to do things too where they would with aversion therapy, where they would inject you with this material where it would make you like vomit or basically, you know, you would excrete bodily fluids as a way to decondition yourself to anything that had to do with homosexual behavior or anything. You know, it's extremely disturbing and really graphic. You know, if you research this stuff, I mean, your discretion is advised. But this is what people went through just 50 years ago. And this was considered like official medical research, and it was basically like torture. People getting away with torturing, you know,
but happening at a collective societal level. So when you go into that specificity of that one scene, you're actually hitting at something that's a collective experience, and that's a huge thing to tap into.
And it
must carry a lot of weight.
It does, and you would see that on the audience's faces, because it's like, oh gosh, it's like people get naturally uncomfortable with the fact that I'm, you know, being reenacted, that I'm being shocked on my genitals, and it's really tense scene. It was very little lighting, and it's, you know, it make people uncomfortable. But that's what it's supposed to do. Is that it's supposed to expose you to this part of history that was real life. And, the fact that you're feeling something from that is basically what I think that's what I wanted. And that's what theater and acting is all about. It's all about eliciting an emotion, no matter how small, whether it be positive or negative. That's what theater and film and television stories, that's what stories are supposed to do. They're supposed to make you feel something.
Is it cathartic? Could you feel the audience's energy? Is it cathartic to feel like you're hitting those nerves? Like, oh yeah, they're we're experiencing this together.
Yeah,
and that's different from screen acting, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, because you're doing it in front of and that's what I love about theater is that the emotion, and it's all unfiltered and it's all there. It's right in front of you. And you're experiencing something with the audience at the same time. But with film, there's a lens, and there's the whole fourth wall basically, where on the other side of the camera you have a bunch of production people, 100 of them, and you could take the most intimate scene you could think of in a movie or a film, and on the camera, on that little 8 by, no, I don't know what the dimensions are, or, of what the camera, that's all you see. But on the other side, it's just completely different. And as the actor themselves, you're supposed to portray the fact that you are literally in this situation, as if you're living through these characters and living through the given circumstances that you're given. But with theater, it's all there, And there was a couple performances where people were kind of, they're strapped to a chair, strapped. I mean, and I had these cable wires, the ones with the little pinchy ends. I don't know what they're called.
I have no
cables.
idea.
They're little cables that you would
I'm just the barista.
Yeah.
Not even anymore.
But it was a prop. So we had a prop where I had, shorts, but underneath my shorts I had underwear, and I would clip the wires to make it look like they were going in my shorts, and it would wrap around my leg, and it would go behind my feet, and the scene is you would physically see somebody going through this torture. And sometimes I would get audiences kind of laughing in discomfort.
Really?
Because and I remember being why this is in my head, or after the scene I would go off stage, I'm why the fuck are people laughing? And it's just I had to think of oh, these people are probably really uncomfortable, 'cause it's something they probably never had to experience before. And I'm there screaming and crying, and I'm giving it my all, okay?
It's so interesting, not the expected response, but also maybe also an appropriate, because it's hard to know where to go.
Yeah, people laugh if you're uncomfortable, and some people would get really emotional, and some people just are just taking it, and that's what theater's all about, really, is just having to get you thinking about things that you never really thought about, or affecting you in some way. We want you to feel different the way going in as you were leaving,
Yeah, and I to kind of wrap it up, for Gracie and I, it definitely had that impact, and it brought up a lot of conversation for the two of us after. So for the two of us, job well done. And you were so good.
It was only 2 scenes, by the way. I only had 2 speaking roles, 2 speaking scenes.
But they were short, but also so integral for the story, and you were very watchable and also charismatic. So look at you. You had this quality of... Yeah, we just enjoyed watching you.
Oh, thanks, Myles. Yeah, I remember.
I know I'm biased, but also.
Yeah, no, it's okay. And it really helps, because I couldn't see the audiences. So, when you're off stage, I'm oh my gosh, you saw that performance, and not every performance would be the same. So it's oh, you saw the good one. It's oh, you saw the one. But that's me talking for myself.
Yeah.
But it always just kind of it was really. I don't know if you. Oh, you told me when you were coming. Yeah. So I don't think I remembered what day you were coming, but it was nice to see you guys afterwards, because it's oh, okay. I just spent 2 hours crying and screaming, and I was oh, this is nice. Seeing you guys.
Good.
So it really did mean a lot and it was the first time you saw me perform too. So that really meant a lot for you guys to be there. But yeah, it was honestly I'm so grateful to have had that experience and telling a story that is relevant, historical, and that is part of our the queer community. It's a part of our history, and there's a lot of different stories to tell, but this is just one fraction of that. And it's to get you curious about what was it like back then, and we can't forget the past, despite us moving forward. That's kind of the whole message about it.
Yeah, which is something I was taught growing up. I was taught, like, if you want to know the present, if you don't know the past, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yep.
And so you were just following that all the way through. So thank you, and also thank you for meeting me in my own vulnerability in this episode too. Because I feel like oftentimes in like the podcast public medium, everyone's so fucking afraid of getting canceled that it's hard. It's a balance, because it's like, obviously you don't want to be a person who's working all your shit out publicly, but also there's a balance of like, there is something important about hearing the messiness of the conversations in an appropriate form. There's something I think that is important about people hearing that we're going through the process right now. Like, I'm not going to be the same person tomorrow that I am today.
Yeah.
And there's stuff that Zach and I recorded. We recorded, like, for those who don't know, we recorded like the first episode back in April.
Oh, wow.
And we're like doing this whole thing where we're going to create like a narrative out of the podcast and record the second episode at the end, but we're really trying to demonstrate that it's okay to change and it's okay to be in the process.
And
so
I just want to say,
thank you for meeting me there.
Absolutely.
And even catching me in that moment.
I just want to say, if anyone is lucky enough to get to know Myles, Myles is literally one of the most kindest human beings on this goddamn earth.
Say more.
No, it's like, just like, you are just so gentle, so generous, so kind, and that's like something that's like I always say kindness is free. Kindness is free. It's like the easiest thing to do,
and you demonstrate that well too.
Thank you. But like, you just like, I ever since I've known you, is that you've been this kind, gentle, like, person that is just like so. I don't know. It's just like. I feel like there's very few people like you out there, and I want more people to be like you. But I was really, it was such a pleasure being on here. And this is my first podcast.
There you go.
I've never done a podcast before, so this is very different. So
again,
if you get tired of my voice, I apologize. I get tired of my own voice too.
I doubt that'll happen. But yeah, thank you. And I kind of want to say this too. Like, I think a huge part of me having my adaptability, it's related to a lot of things that I can't, more for therapy than in a podcast. But I do credit a huge part of that to growing up. Who you saw my brother Ian give his speech. Growing up with like a brother with a disability. I didn't really realize it at the time, but I think it has helped me get a leg up in learning to connect with people on a human level who have a different experience than me. Because that was clear from the beginning. His experience of life was so different from me, but like, we shit talk. I see him as my brother. So I do like...
Ian, right?
Yeah. Actually, more recently, I realized like the kindness that I tend to emanate and mirror, I think a lot of that I got from him and like learning to relate to him.
Yeah.
He's
so
like
beautiful.
the happiest person I've ever
your
met.
family is it's just such a beautiful family.
Yeah.
You and
I got
Gracie's.
really lucky.
Yeah.
You got lucky. So anyways, thank you for listening. Thank you, Michael Garcia. Sorry, I gotta remember actor name.
Michael Mike, whatever.
Yeah.
Mike.
There's a story
Go by many
that
names.
Yes, many names. So Michael
Many
Mike
Mikes. Too many Michaels out there. Gotta stand out somehow.
There's so many. It's the most common ass name at Starbucks.
So
but thank you for vulnerably sharing about something that I believe is really important, and hopefully this can play, even if it's small, a role in getting this story out into the world a little bit more. But anyways, thank you, friends, and I look forward to future conversations and tuning in the future.
Thank you.
With love and gratitude, friends. Hello, friends. This is Myles Haruki here. I just finished recording my conversation with my friend and former coworker Michael Garcia, an actor. I also wanted to say it was a very vulnerable conversation for me too. And I am really grateful for a friend like Michael who was able to kind of help me out and meet me where I was at. But I hope in some way that this can be something that, in my vulnerability, you guys are seeing me as a human that is in process, and a human that, just like all of us, I have choices that I made in the past that I'm learning to live with now in a way where I make the right adjustments and move into the future, but also hold my former self with compassion, which is a hard thing to do, and I don't always do it well. And I'm thankful for a friend like Michael Garcia. I talked a little bit about my youth pastor days and some choices I made, but I'm really grateful for Michael being able to meet me there and hold space. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity for me to hold space for Michael, talking about his craft as an actor and all that stuff. For those who listen, thank you for meeting me there. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you all so much for listening to this New Mind Cafe podcast. We really appreciate your support with this journey of exploring creative people and getting inspired by many different art forms. If you enjoyed the music on this episode, well, that was all original work by me, and if you want to hear more original music, you can check out our band called New Mind Collective. When I'm not working on music or podcast episodes, I'm working on the other component of my small business, which is roasting coffee. So if you want to follow along all of what my business New Mind Cafe is doing in the coffee and the arts industries, then please check out our website at www.neumindcafe.com. On there you'll find upcoming events, gigs, podcast episodes, music, products, and all the links to the social media and platforms to stream music. If you are enjoying this podcast, please like, subscribe, leave a rating, or comment wherever you're hearing this podcast. And please, please, please share this with others. We are trying to spread the word about what we are doing, and we want to include others in this as well. So if you or someone you know is creative and wants to share, then please email us at neumindcafe@gmail.com. Thank you all again, and have such a great day.